Although wolves can be dangerous in certain circumstances, they're generally wary of humans, and attacks on people are rare. The following true story, however, depicts one of these improbable incidents, which led to the tragic death of at the time 24-year-old Patricia Wyman. This event would go down in history as one of the most devastating wolf attacks on record. Patricia Wyman was a young and adventurous woman who always had a passion for wolves. She'd earned a degree in wildlife biology from the University of Guelph, where she spent several years studying wolves and their behavior. Her love for these magnificent creatures would only grow stronger after this, and backed by a number of her university professors, who also consisted of mostly wolf enthusiasts that admired her deep passion for them, she would be highly encouraged by them to follow her dreams. Patricia would spend most of her spare time visiting wildlife reserves and learning everything she could about wolves. In fact, her friends and family would call her the Wolf Lady, due to her knowledge of these animals as well as her devotion to them. Patricia's dreams would one day finally become a reality when she'd land a job as a caretaker at the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve. The reserve was a stunning 15-acre enclosure, surrounded by lush trees and rolling hills. The exhibit was part of an educational program to help foster a better appreciation for the role of wolves in the wild. Patricia would not only become the new caretaker for the wolves, but she would also run the education program based around them. She'd go on to spend countless of hours observing the wolves from that point on, which in turn would make her already deep love for them grow even more. By all accounts, Patricia was known as fearless, as she'd always been eager to study these magnificent animals up close, determined to use her knowledge and expertise to educate the public about their wonders as a species, and to help foster a better understanding of their place in the eyes of the world. Little did Patricia know, however, that her passion for wolves would lead her down a path filled with danger and uncertainty. As she continued to delve deeper into the world of the wolves, she would soon discover that there was more to these animals than just their beauty and grace. She noted in her observations that they undeniably had a dark side, one filled with danger and unpredictability. Her first 2 visits to the wolf enclosure were exhilarating but also nerve-wracking, as despite her passion for them, she couldn't shake off the feeling that these wolves gave her a feeling of unease that seemed to be steadily growing inside of her. And this was true especially when it came to the alpha male. It's important to note that wolves are creatures with unique hunting and social behavior. They hunt in packs using their sharp senses and intense coordination to take down prey much larger than themselves. Their haunting howls, often heard echoing throughout the wilderness, are not only used as a means of communication, but also as a way of intimidation in terms of marking their territory and scaring away competitors. Wolves also exhibit a complex social structure, with each pack having a strict hierarchy and a designated alpha wolf who leads the pack. This alpha wolf is not only the strongest, but also the most cunning of the pack, displaying a level of intelligence that leaves the rest of the pack in awe, as those who've been fortunate enough to witness this marveled at their sharp instincts, stealth, and raw power to bring down their prey. Patricia's observations furthermore noted that this particular alpha wolf was different than any other one she'd ever met before. She would take note of his piercing eyes every time they would stare right through her, and the way he would stand tall and watch her from a distance, never getting too close. And because Patricia was very determined to prove herself as a capable caretaker, she would never report these concerns to her supervisor, as she feared that this was a display of weakness on her part. But this of course would turn out to be the wrong decision. It was a normal day for Tricia as she strides down the enclosure to do her usual check on the wolves. As she neared the enclosure, the wolves start to move about and their howls fill the air. The aforementioned alpha male, whom of course she was wary about, is the first to catch her eye as she enters. But a determined Tricia, despite her fears of him, this time stands tall and doesn't let his piercing gaze intimidate her. As she enters the enclosure, the pack then begins circling her, with their curious eyes locked onto her. And it was at this point that in a split second, Tricia stumbles upon a fallen branch and falls to the ground. Her piercing scream then shatters the stillness of the forest, alerting the rest of the pack, who rise to their feet, sniffing the air for what caused the commotion. And just as a traumatized Tricia attempts to get back up to her feet, the alpha male would then lead a charge straight at her. Trisha desperately tries to fend off the first attack by flailing her arms, but the alpha male would prove too quick as he sinks his sharp teeth into her neck in an attempt to neutralize her screams. And as the other wolves join in, their frenzy heightened by the taste of blood, Trisha then begins getting brutally bitten and clawed from all sides, unable to escape the relentless attack. The sound of snarling wolves and Trisha's blood-curdling cries for help fill the air, and with the pack working as one, movements precise and calculated, Trisha is then flung around like a rag doll as her body is battered by the powerful canines. And with the attack being swift, brutal, and unrelenting, Trisha then, in a final burst of energy, manages to push off the alpha male with everything she had in her. But this victory is short-lived, as the pack then converges upon her once more, with multiple members sinking their teeth deep into her arm and torso. At which point Trisha's screams would die down as she succumbs to her gruesome wounds, her body lying still among the wolves. And in mere minutes, the devastating attack is finally over, as the pack would then retreat from her lifeless body, leaving the forest silent once more, the only sounds being the distant howls of the victorious pack. As the sun rose over the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve the next day, it would bring with it unimaginable tragedy. As the staff of the reserve made their rounds that day, they noticed something unusual in the wolf enclosure. The typically vocal wolves were silent, and their eyes were trained on something in the distance. And as the staff approached, they would report a sight that would haunt them forever. Trisha's lifeless body was covered in bite wounds, with torn clothing strewn about. Her body had been so severely mauled that most of the staff would instantly turn their heads away upon seeing it. The police would then arrive soon after, and the investigators would quickly determine that Patricia had indeed been fatally attacked by the wolves that she so dearly loved. The news of the attack would spread quickly, and the reserve was soon inundated with journalists and onlookers. The staff, of course, was devastated, but this wasn't solely because they'd lost a colleague. It was also because they knew what came next for the wolves. Quickly after this tragic incident, the decision would then be made to put down the wolves, despite the protests of animal rights activists who'd heard about the case. The investigation into the attack was thorough and revealed some of the specific events that they believe led up to Patricia's final encounter with the wolves. As for the staff of the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve, life would never quite be the same after Trisha's death. Until this day, they have a hard time forgetting the brave young woman who had given her life to her passion that they too would dedicate their own. The attack would have a profound impact on everyone it touched, as Patricia's family and friends noted that grappling with grief and shock as they try to make sense of what happened has been the toughest thing many of them had to undergo in their lives. And the community would also be affected, with many feeling a sense of fear and unease in the aftermath of the attack. And of course, rumors and speculation would run rampant, with some blaming Patricia for what had happened, while others pointed fingers at the staff in the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve for allowing this tragedy to occur. As experts were called in to examine the evidence and to piece together what had happened in the moments leading up to Patricia's death, it was later found out that it was a combination of factors that had led to the tragedy. The investigators would note that Patricia had ultimately been not experienced enough and was lacking the proper training and knowledge necessary to work with such unpredictable and dangerous animals. Not to mention the enclosure she'd been working in was also found to have serious flaws with inadequate fencing and insufficient staffing, all factors which were ultimately believed to have contributed to the attack.